Emerson.
The one and only.
The man, the myth, the icon. Ladies and gentlemen listening to Thursday Night AMP Live, this is Emerson Whitner, the man who recaps NXT. So, Emerson, good evening. Thank you for joining us.
No problem. Thank you for having me. It's my first actual radio interview show.
Yeah.
And that's my co-host, Sierra. Sierra, say hello to Emerson.
Hola, ¿cómo estás?
I'm happy to see you found the speaker part of your phone there. I heard you a few seconds ago. It sounded like you were at a tunnel somewhere.
Yeah, she had to get it together before we started this interview because I know she's got 1,000,001 questions about NXT. But before we get into that, let's get into your background a little. How did you start recapping NXT for me and for Wrestling Observer? What was the background that led to that?
It was October 2010, right after NXT left Sci-Fi and went on to WWE.com. I guess whoever was doing the review for Dave and Brian wasn't able to keep watching it now that it was online. And so Dave put out a request. I remember he said he needed somebody to review NXT and ROH. And believe it or not, my first thought was ROH, which is sort of funny. So I emailed Dave and he's like, well, I have something for ROH. What about NXT? I'm like, sure, I guess. And the funny thing is, I think that was when ROH was on HDNet. It lasted maybe 6 more months in HDNet before it went off the air for a while until Sinclair bought them. And here I am doing NXT still over 3 years later, shockingly.
Although NXT has changed quite a bit in that time because when it was still on TV, it was more of a really poorly executed reality competition type show where people were getting graded on points, but then they were forced to do these wacky physical challenges that had nothing to do with wrestling, and it was just a mess. And it was supposed to be debuting new talent to the WWE roster, but it was actually making a lot of them look like clowns. And then FCW had their situation and Deep South Wrestling had their situation, and all of a sudden NXT becomes the new name of the developmental territory and we get a fresh start with talent actually doing wrestling instead of wacky reality show shit. So you got into it at just the right time.
Oh yeah, the only thing is while the wacky reality show shit was hit and miss at times, once NXT, because they did the NXT for a couple more seasons, they did NXT Redemption, and after a while they just stopped having it as a contest and just had it as just superstars with yellow robes. But it was the most fun show on TV for a year with like Hawkins and what's his name, Rex and Bateman and all them. And then they changed it to what it is now, and it's still sort of hit and miss. I mean, obviously the wrestling itself for the most part is better, but every so often I'll get a wacky skit or a wacky stipulation or storyline. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. And yeah,
go ahead.
I really enjoy the show most weeks. The only thing I hate is Hulu and their 5,000 commercials, but you gotta take it with what you can, I guess.
Sarah, did we lose you in a tunnel again? Because I don't think that's on Emerson's end.
No, I don't think it's on my end either.
No. Nothing going on over here.
Okay, it just sounded like something wacky. I didn't know, but anyway.
Maybe we're being haunted. I don't know.
Well, Chaotic Christmas was coming up around the corner, so maybe the ghost of Christmas past is here on the show with us.
I'm just saying.
So, Emerson, I want to get your thoughts because it's been a hell of a year for guys coming from NXT to the main roster. And we already saw that start last year with the emergence of the Shield and how they came to dominate on TV. But then we've seen all kinds of guys come up since then, you know, from the Wyatt family to Xavier Woods to Damian Sandow to just making huge impacts on WWE television. So give us your thoughts on NXT's rise from the bottom to the top in the last year.
Well, the Shield, obviously a lot of the people come up, like the Wyatt family or Big E Langston for the most part, they keep their same gimmicks that they have on NXT. The Shield, I mean, they took 3 guys who all were doing different things and put them together with this entirely new gimmick. And at first I was like, yeah, what? Because Roman Reigns, and I'm still sort of scared when they break him off in the single, but Roman Reigns wasn't very good. He mostly wrestled in 2 to 3 minute matches. You could tell that there was something about him, but also that WWE really liked him. Like, you just knew that this was going to be somebody, and I compared him at the time to Mason Ryan, where they're going to bring him up and they're going to give him 50,000 pushes ahead of people who you might think is more ready, and he might not, like Mason Ryan, unfortunately at the moment, might not make it. And so I was worried that they were going to bring him up so early, and that was going to happen, but I was pleasantly surprised with that. I never marked out so loud in May or June when that first Wyatt family promo aired.
Oh, yes.
I love the act on NXT. It started with Bray, and then he added the other two. I was sort of surprised that, because I figured Vince would look at, especially Harper and Rowan, and say, these two look like sloths, look like hobos. What the hell do we want them on our show for? And that they won't last very long. And, I'm sort of surprised that they've had the degree of success they have in that regard. Obviously they're not wrestling 15, 20-minute main event matches like they were. Now they've had some big matches recently, and they're going to again on Sunday. But yeah, I'm sort of surprised they haven't brought any women up except for Summer Rae, and she only was there more because the brunette girl they had for Fandango was a student or whatever, and she couldn't do it all the time. So she's sort of there by, I don't say accident, but by accident. But she's done really well. She hasn't really done much in the ring except for dance, even when she's supposed to wrestle. But yeah.
Well, it's actually one of our favorite topics on this show, because Sierra and I have for the longest time been trying to get Paige called up to the main roster. And let's just get your thoughts on Paige really quick, since we're talking about the women of NXT.
She's probably the most unique look of anyone down there, because she is so pale, and and she wears, of course, that dark black outfit, so her paleness even stands out more. She's pretty good in the ring, and I guess the main gripe they have is that she is about 20 years old, so they want her to be a little older, and I can understand that, because you've had people that young before who may not have been ready for the main stage, like Renee Dupree, and fizzled out. Paige, I think, could come right in and probably be one of the three best women they have on the roster, and I couldn't even tell you who the two that would be better than her would be. Probably Natalya and
AJ.
Honestly, I think she's better than AJ.
She's light years ahead of AJ Lee. I'm sorry to say it, folks, but this girl's been wrestling since she was 13.
True,
believe it or not.
But when he says in terms of who she would hang with on the roster, AJ is probably the most over person on the roster right now. So even if she's more talented in the ring, it would be a natural for like her and Natalya would be like the top three.
Oh yeah. I can only imagine when she has to wrestle with Nikki Bella. No offense, Nikki Bella. She's a beautiful woman, blah, 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 blah. But I imagine that match would really, really suck. And, yeah.
Well, I'll say this much for the Bellas. Just by virtue of being with Daniel Bryan and John Cena, they're going to eventually get better, because those guys don't want to be around girls that make them look bad by sucking in the ring all the time.
That's true, but at the same time, the divas aren't really expected to have good matches. They're expected to just go out there, look pretty, sort of bring the crowd down between two matches. And is it fair? Not really, but then again, if life was fair, Sarah Del Rey would probably be wrestling instead of training. So.
Oh, amen. Amen to that. In fact, if life was fair, we could just put most of the NXT women's division on TV and see better matches than the current crop of WWE divas, because from Charlotte to Emma to Paige to Sasha Banks, they could all go out there and work a good match.
But, it's kind of like, quick question. This whole thing of they don't really want to bring Paige up because of her age. Is it kind of just, it's understandable that they're saying that because you never know what can happen with her being so young. But isn't it kind of just complete bullshit that they're making this kind of excuse when they got Josiane Offerman from Total Divas traveling the road and has been on Raw and was in Survivor Series? And she's way younger than her. She's 19.
JoJo, it is a double standard, and I bet if they were to take Paige for Total Divas, I don't know the show would have been any better. It couldn't have been any worse, but she'd probably on Raw every week, or as often as JoJo is, which I haven't seen her in a while, at least since the repeat of Survivor Series match, where they managed to go through 13 eliminations in 6 minutes. But,
that match was a hot mess.
And it was even more fun at Survivor Series being there live. I just sitting there thinking, good God. And the funny thing is it was better than I thought it would be, which is faint praise, but still.
What's funny is one of our chat room listeners right now is Nikolai, who did the Raw recap this week and normally recaps SmackDown for us. He lives in Boston, so he was like, did I cross paths with Emerson and not even know it? And I'm like, yeah, dude, you probably did.
It's possible. It was funny because, like, the whole aftermath, and I sent you a report of what happened after the show went off the air. It was probably louder for the whole John Cena Randy Orton interaction than for almost anything else on the show. And, like, obviously live, we didn't know when the show went off the air. Like, I figured the whole thing with Vince coming out at the end wasn't going to be on it, but I figured something was. It turned out they just went off the air, like, right when Cena got in the ring and said, or held up his belt or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It was crazy, and, like, we were all thinking, oh my God, it's like only 10:40, so still like 20 minutes left for the top of the hour. They could do Cena versus Orton, like, right now, and unadvertised would probably be a bad idea, but that's what a lot of us were thinking.
Yeah, it definitely felt like it ended way too early on pay-per-view, so I can understand why you thought the show wasn't over just from seeing that. And I was just going to say, isn't it kind of weird to think about it that both Big E Langston and Damian Sandow are products of NXT and now they're wrestling for the Intercontinental title on pay-per-view? I mean, you say in one way he's fallen off the radar, but on the other hand, both of these guys are way higher now.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they're both happier where they are now than they were a year ago. Big E Langston, the only thing, and they probably don't want to make the comparison that everyone else would to King Kong Bundy, but I'm sad they never brought up his 5 gimmick, that it would demand a 5 count every time he made a pin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, would have been it. Since they let everybody keep their gimmicks coming up from NXT, why couldn't they let him keep that?
Yeah. It was always funny because when you watched the show and he was doing that, it was almost like the referees didn't know what the hell he was doing, because they'd count 3, ring the bell, and Big would still be on covering whoever and screaming at them to count 5. And every so often, whoever it was would drop down and count twice more. But so often, everyone would just be staring at him like, what the hell are you talking about, dude? Get up. The match is over.
Somebody needed to clear the ref's head. This is what Big E does. Roll with it.
Yes, and it was almost a running joke every week, like, okay, will they do it this week? And,
one of the things that I both love and hate about Big E right now is I think he has a ton of charisma, and I'm glad they're giving him this chance on television, but at the same time, he gets so excited that he's blah, 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 blah. It's like, dude, slow down a little. I know you're excited, you're happy to be on main roster TV, but somebody along the line had to give him a little advice on promos just to take it easy.
Take a deep breath and just go with it. Excuse me 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that. I'm still getting over a bit of a cold.
No problem.
I think he could be a really big deal. I'm shocked they haven't yet did the, wait, he's only like 5'9" sort of thing. Like, I know Daniel Bryan's like 5'7" or whatever, but yeah, it's sort of weird that you don't hear that as much anymore, that, well, so-and-so's only this big or so-and-so's only that big. You still hear, hey, Great Khali's 7 foot tall, so let's push him, or, hey, Randy Orton's really big, let's give him a push. Not that you ever need an excuse to push Randy Orton, but still.
That's one thing I've actually been hopeful for about NXT is that since a lot of the guys that are on that roster are guys that are either recruited from the independents or guys that are smaller stature that are looking to break into the business, it's been my hope for a while that as more NXT guys progress onto the main roster, we'll get away from this whole big man mentality. But then again, with Vince and Triple H in charge, it's going to be pretty hard to shake it.
I think, and with Triple H, you got a better chance than with Vince. I don't know why, and I'm probably still wrong, but you get the idea Triple H doesn't care as much that the guy he may push is 5'7", for instance.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously WWE will always still be the land of the really, really big guys. You always have your Khali's or the big shows, but you can tell they don't mind as much having the Daniel Bryans, and he's like the shortest person I can think of who keeps coming up, but the Daniel Bryans, Big E Langston, etc.
Sin Cara. Whichever version of Sin Cara you choose.
Hunakara. Yeah. And that's another thing, like, and to show you how smart I am, when Sin Cara first came out, or Hunico came out of Sin Cara a few weeks ago, I'm like, oh, Sin Cara got a tattoo. That's cool.
I had people texting me right away like, dude, it's Hunico playing Sakara again. I'm like, what? They're like, look at his arm. I'm like, oh shit, yeah. And then like 2 minutes later, Sin Cara WWE tweeted that he was in a restaurant in Mexico. It's like, okay, clearly he's not at TV tonight.
Really? He wasn't in two places at once? I was so surprised.